Hi everyone, it's Mike here. Thanks for joining me for another Art Journal page start to finish video. This time we're going to be looking at Journal 52, which is week 20, and the prompt for this week is good advice. So I'm starting with my Strathmore Mixed Media Art Journal, and the emphasis for this page is on words. So I'm going to be gluing down some book pages that I've taken from an old book with matte medium, and I'm going to make sure that it's well and truly sealed because I'm going to be adding lots and lots of paint to it. You may have noticed I'm wearing my favourite red and white stripy top today. People say that I remind them of somebody. Can't think who though. So I'm just giving the second page a really good coating of the matte medium to make sure that everything is well and truly stuck down and that it's all sealed rather lovely. So just giving it a quick heat blast just to make sure that everything is nice and dry, and then I'm going to be adding a coat of white gesso over both pages, and then I'm going to just remove some of that white gesso with a baby wipe just to reveal the text underneath. So when I've removed as much gesso as I need, I'm going to give it a quick heat blast with my heat tool to make sure everything's dry, and then I'm going to begin adding in some colour using the Indigo Blue English Cottage Artist Acrylic Paint, and I'm using Townhouse Teal and Wimberry Pie. I'm using Burning Bonfire and Peppermint Tea. So I'm just going to take the lids off in readiness, get them all ready for adding them to the page. And as soon as there's a lot of paint on the lids themselves, I'm probably going to use actually the paint from there rather than from the pot. So I'm just adding blocks of colour with a paintbrush which is about a ½ an inch in width. Even though I am speeded up to about 2 to 3 times, I am still actually working quite quickly anyway, because I want to make sure I get all the paint down onto the pages before it dries. Now acrylic paint does dry very, very quickly, but I do want to get in there while it's still wet to remove some paint through a stencil, which you'll see in a moment. But just to make sure the paint is still wet and movable, pliable, malleable, whatever you want to call it, I am going to give it a quick spritz with some water just to make the colours blend a little before I start using the stencil. And the first stencil I'm going to use is a Tim Holtz stencil called Cargo, even though mine doesn't actually say it on. So you can see me there just giving the stencil a quick clean. Because I'm using acrylic paint, they do dry very, very quickly, and if you leave it to dry on there, it'll just cake like mad. So this stencil is called Alphabet Sprinkle, and it's from That Special Touch. Just giving it a quick heat blast, and then I'm going to use the Dina Wakley stencil called Affirmation. So you can see me there removing some of the paint with a baby wipe through the stencil, which is taking the paint away from the page, leaving a white impression behind it. And then finally, just give it a quick heat blast and we'll move on to the next stage. So the next stage, I'm going to be using the Ranger Archival ink, and that's Vermilion. And I'm going to use a finger dauber. It's a Sukaniko finger dauber, 3 in the pack, in case you're interested. And I'm just going to use the same Dina Wakley stencil and just select words that don't really mean anything, but just poignant little words from the stencil, and just put some highlights in red using that ink. Okay, so I'm now going to use the Ranger Archival ink Fern Green, and I'm going to bring back the Tim Holtz Cargo stencil and just add some of the lettering from that over areas of the page, just to add a little bit more texture in and a little bit more layering. So once all the layering is complete, I'm just going to give it a quick heat blast with my heat tool just to make sure that the archival ink is completely dry before I move on to the next stage of my process for this page. So the next step for this page then is using the Vitruvian Man stamp from the Beautiful Mind stamp set from Indigo Blue, and I'm going to use the Ranger archival ink in potting soil. And I'm going to stamp the image in various positions here and there across both pages of my double page spread. I'm making sure I get plenty of the ink on the stamp because I do want a nice impression from the stamp, which you do get because it is quite a nicely detailed and deeply etched rubber stamp. The quality of the Indigo Blue stamps is fantastic. I've never had a bad stamp from them. So now ready to move on to the next stage. I'm going to add some white gesso with my finger around the borders of the page, and then I'm just going to blend that in with a baby wipe and just soften the edges. So out comes the baby wipe, and I'm just blending the gesso into the page just to soften those hard edges. And that completes that stage. So the next stage is to add my quote. Now I've used the Tim Holtz stamp set 1 text, and rather than make you sit through me stamping all the letters out, I've jumped that section. So I've used the potting soil ink again, and I've stamped out my quote and I've cut it out into the word blocks, and I'm just adhering those blocks now down with the matte medium directly onto the page. Now because I've used archival ink, then there's no issues with the ink smearing, or the paint smearing for that matter as well. So just adding the second part of my quote onto the opposite page, and then I'm going to go over all of the word blocks with the matte medium to seal everything down. And then I'm just going over the word blocks there with a baby wipe just to remove, just to clean up or make sure that I've not got too much build-up of the matte medium on the word blocks. So finally, I'm going to bring in a honeycomb stencil from Be Crafty, and I'm going to add some honeycomb patterns around the borders of the page with the archival ink in the potting soil. Again, I'm using the honeycomb pattern to show that it's like hard work and industriousness. And then I'm using a football pen in the black, and I'm just going to go around each of my word blocks and add a border with the pen just to make the quote pop. And as always, my finishing touch for my art journal page is to add the date of its creation and just to sign it, and this art journal page is complete.